Imagine a world where every 4 years, wars were forced to stop, enemies crossed borders without fear, and an entire civilization gathered not to fight but to compete under the eyes of the gods. This was not a myth. This was ancient Greece, and this was the Olympic Games. The ancient Olympic Games began in 776 BCE, not as a sporting event, but as a sacred religious ceremony held in Olympia, a holy sanctuary dedicated to Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. To the ancient Greeks, sport was never separate from faith. Physical strength, endurance, and discipline were seen as reflections of divine order. Competing in the Olympics was an act of worship, a way to honor the gods through the perfection of the human body. Olympia itself was not a city in the modern sense. It had no permanent population, no markets, and no political power. Instead, it existed purely as a sacred space. Athletes, officials, philosophers, poets, and spectators traveled from across the Greek world to reach it. Their journey could take weeks, even months. But once they arrived, they entered a realm where ordinary rules no longer applied. During the Olympic Games, a sacred truce known as the Ekacheria was declared. All warfare was forbidden. Soldiers laid down their weapons, and even rival city-states respected the peace. Prisoners were allowed safe passage. Roads became neutral ground. For a brief moment in time, Greek identity was stronger than political conflict, and competition replaced violence. Only free Greek men were allowed to compete in the ancient Olympics. They did not represent themselves, but their city-states. Victory brought no money, no medals, and no material reward. The winner received only an olive wreath cut from a sacred tree dedicated to Zeus. Yet this simple crown carried immense meaning. It symbolized honor, virtue, and eternal remembrance. An Olympic champion achieved something greater than wealth, immortality and collective memory. The earliest Olympic Games were simple and harsh. For many years, there was only one event, the stadion race, a short sprint across the length of the stadium. Over time, new competitions were added, including wrestling, boxing, pancration, chariot racing, and the pentathlon. These were not gentle contests. There were no time limits, no weight classes, and few safety rules. Blood was common, broken bones were expected, and death was an accepted risk. Athletes trained for years under strict supervision. They followed rigid diets, practiced daily, and prepared both physically and mentally. All competitors swore an oath before a statue of Zeus, promising that they had trained honestly and would obey the rules. Cheating was considered a crime against the gods. Those caught were fined heavily, and statues were erected at Olympia to publicly shame them for eternity. The athletes competed naked, a tradition that symbolized purity, equality, and the ideal human form. To the Greeks, the human body represented harmony between nature and divine design. Strength without discipline was meaningless, and victory without honor was disgraceful. This belief was captured in the Greek concept of arete, the idea that excellence of the body must reflect excellence of character. The Olympic Games were not only about sport, they were a cultural gathering unlike any other. Thousands of spectators filled the hills surrounding the stadium. Philosophers debated ideas beneath olive trees. Poets recited verses celebrating heroes and gods. Sculptors studied the athletes' bodies, seeking perfection in stone. News traveled quickly. Alliances were formed, and reputations were made or destroyed. Women were forbidden from competing or even watching the Olympic Games, with only rare exceptions. However, women were not completely excluded from athletic life. Separate competitions, such as the Heraean Games, were held in honor of the goddess Hera. These events reveal that athletic ideals still influence society, even within strict social boundaries. As Greek civilization expanded, the Olympic Games grew in prestige and influence. When Greece fell under Roman control, the Games continued, but their meaning slowly changed. Roman rulers admired Greek culture, yet they favored spectacle over sacred ritual. Professional athletes replaced citizen competitors. Corruption increased, and the spiritual bond between sport and religion weakened. By the 4th century CE, the ancient world itself was changing. Christianity became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. In 393 CE, Emperor Theodosius Thyron banned the Olympic Games, viewing them as pagan ceremonies incompatible with Christian belief. After nearly 200 years, the ancient Olympics came to an end. The stadiums fell silent, temples crumbled. Olympia was abandoned and slowly buried by time, earthquakes, and floods. Yet the idea of the Olympic Games never truly disappeared. Ancient texts preserved their memory. Ruins whispered of a civilization that believed competition could serve peace rather than destruction. In the 19th century, inspired by classical ideals, modern thinkers revived the Olympics, hoping to reconnect sport with international unity. Although the modern Olympics differ greatly from their ancient ancestors, the core spirit remains unchanged. The pursuit of excellence, respect for rules, competition without hatred, a temporary pause in conflict. These ideas were born in ancient Greece on sacred ground, under the imagined gaze of the gods. The ancient Olympic Games were never about records or prizes. They were about identity, honor, and belief. They taught the world that strength guided by discipline could unite people rather than divide them. And even today, every time the Olympic flame is lit, the ancient promise of Olympia quietly returns.